Hey everyone, Jody Avirgan here. Welcome to This Day, a history show from Radiotopia. We're about to bring you part 2 of our conversation about the whole America250 anniversary, which is really kicking off in earnest this 4th of July, and then running all through 2026. We here on the show are planning all sorts of coverage and great stories about 250 years of American history. We're also keeping our eye on how the celebration is being run, how it's being politicized, and how it's being contested, and what that says about our current age. So first off, shout out to everyone who is watching this on YouTube. Please subscribe to This Day Pod there. And also shout out to everyone who is subscribing and supporting our newsletter, where we are doing America250 Watch. We are now the #1 trending history newsletter on Substack. That's really cool. We really appreciate everyone's support at whatever level you can, so join on in at thisdaypod.com. Now look, before I kick it to the rest of my conversation with Nicole Hemmer and Kelly Carter-Jackson, I did mention on the last episode that President Trump was going to give a big speech at the Iowa State Fair on Thursday, July 3rd, kicking off America250. And he did, and I watched it for you. It was a full hour long. I will say that like many Trump speeches, it wandered. The vast majority of it actually turned into kind of a victory lap for that big domestic policy bill that he had just passed that day. There wasn't too much new in there that framed America250. He did say, though, things like, "We will never give in, we will never back down, and we will never ever surrender. Our hearts bleed red, white, and blue, and together we look forward to the 250th year of American independence, and we will make America powerful again." Which is pretty boilerplate stuff for Trump, I know, even though it's really intense and a lot to think about there. But actually, to my mind, the only real notable piece of information in that speech was that Trump floated the idea that next summer, as part of America250, there would be a big UFC fight on the White House lawn. He said, quote, "We have a lot of land there," talking about the grounds at the White House, I suppose, "and that we want to have a championship fight, a full fight, like 25,000 people. So we'll see if that comes together. We'll keep our eye on that. There is plenty to unpack and think about in that proposal. And that actually, I would say, sets up this conversation today quite nicely, because Trump clearly loves a spectacle. He clearly loves a celebration of violence and might. And we already have a sense of who is going to be responsible for trying to pull off all of that spectacle over the next year plus. So here's that conversation. I think it will help you get your head around how all of this is coming together. Take a listen or watch if you're on YouTube, and thanks again to everyone who is supporting us through the newsletter at thisdaypod.com. Here we go. Part 2 of our look at what we already know about America250, me, Nikki, and Kelly. Here we go. I want to kind of take a little bit of a step back. We got some understanding of how this whole America250 project is coming together, but we do feel like we know more about that now, 1 year out, than we did even just like over the last few weeks. I feel like a lot of kind of specifics have come into place. I want to give a shout out to Mother Jones, who wrote a big long piece called "How MAGA Took Over America's 250th Birthday," and it sort of laid out some of the specifics here. But Kelly, before we were taping, you sort of pointed out that you felt like that Trump military parade was sort of the first one of these celebrations.
Oh yeah, his birthday extravaganza with the military parade, also celebrating the 250th anniversary of the United States Army. And it felt, and this was something that all of the pundits were talking about, that this parade felt like a kickoff to the sesquicentennial, but also
semi-quincentennial.
But I can't say it. The SQC. Yeah, I'm not even trying. But all of the, the pomp and circumstance and the fanfare and the marching and the flyovers, and it was quite the event. And yet there is this duality when you're watching it, because it's still not really well attended. It still feels like, I don't know, a relic out of another country where you see like Korea marching or Russia, marching, for that fanfare to sort of show its, military force and might. It just felt awkward. And even the soldiers that are participating, it felt forced, like just like, oh, you don't want to be here either, do you? Like all of it was just, yeah. I tried not to give it too much attention. Actually, I watched a lot of the highlights, but it was just too much.
It's kind of like at July 4th when you try to set off a firework and you get a dud and it just kind of fizzes out. It was a very like sleepy and squeaky start to things.
Well, the squeaky,
and on the one hand, you could
of that tank,
working.
Yes.
It's one of those things where on the one hand you're like, okay, so there's a lot of stuff that's being planned, and a lot of it doesn't seem entirely in line with U.S. democratic traditions. But I thought that they would be able to pull this off a lot better than they were. It is very much a like administration that runs on spectacle, and it failed at spectacle, which was surprising. So maybe like a lot of this will just burn out. But at the other hand, like Trump is a little bit humiliated. So I think there might be
there are massive protests happening all over the country. You can't forget that. Yeah.
But actually that and what you were getting at, Kelly, I think sort of brings to mind something a really fascinating dynamic that I think is going to run, has run throughout Trump, but it's going to run throughout a lot of this America 250 stuff. We see it in the speeches that he's already giving. But, there is ostensibly a little bit of a underlying idea here that like American history should be celebratory and it should be, feel good and it should just sort of inspire. And yet all of the sort of manifestations of that have felt very dour and like not very full of pageantry, and like a little sinister, at times. And I think the parade felt that way too. Like it wasn't even like the fun celebration of all the cool tanks we have that, you would expect, like, well, at the very least, whether I agree with that project or not, they'll pull that off. And so it is this interesting, like, on the one hand, you hear the America 250 folks say, like, we want to be celebratory and feel good. But I think you also understand that this is gravely serious business to them because they understand what's at stake when you tell American history. And that kind of like seriousness and darker edge, it's like it's like you're holding it too tight and all of a sudden you're choking it kind of thing,
Yeah.
But so it's like, it's not going to be fun and it's not going to be kind of like effective.
Parades are like, the best parades I attended as a kid were the ones where like they threw out bubblegum and candy and you saw like a Miss USA, like, and there was so much frivolity and fun in it. You had, people on stilts walking. It almost felt like a circus appeal. You had drum lines and there were music, and this was not that. This was not that at all. And I think we're also in a moment where people are having a real hard time trying to illustrate what patriotism looks like or how it should be exhibited because people are so upset with the state of politics.
Yeah.
This was the exact same problem with the bicentennial in 1976, right? That it was happening at a time when people were kind of wrestling with what it meant to be patriotic or loyal to the United States, especially in the wake of Vietnam and all of this internal criticism, right? And all of this like deep soul searching that was happening in the United States at the time. But also when it's hard to counter the story of U.S. decline. Trump is actually a declensionist president. He came in saying America's a piece of shit. And the reason you should elect him is because he's going to make it better. And here we are 10 years later, and people are like, well, it's all great. Things aren't going well. And that, I think, is a really hard thing to counter program, because even as you try to override it with the fireworks and the tanks and the marching, like underneath it is this kind of shared sense that the wheels are coming off.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, you can't think of the United States and think of the Statue of Liberty. Give me you're tired. You're weary. And then square that with footage of ICE agents snatching people off the streets. Like the kind of hypocrisy, people cannot get their heads around that.
Yeah. Though I will say, and I want to get to the commission, but like on that day of, these No Kings protests had more joy in them than the celebratory on the march, which is just kind of stunning, So yeah, and I think we'll do lots of conversations about the bicentennial as we kind of mark this semi-quincentennial. But I think there was there was a little bit of joy in that and patriotism and like so forth. And part of that is related to like the fact that there was just a little bit more of a monoculture at that point and so forth. But it is this interesting dynamic that we'll keep our eye on. But the reason I wanted to start a little bit with the military parade is because there is a direct connection. The America 250 Commission, let me lay out the story of kind of how that has shifted underneath Trump. Obviously people have known the state's coming for a long while. These commissions have existed for a while. Under the Biden administration, they were set up as largely bipartisan. It has now kind of been in the same way that a lot of arms of government have been quickly reworked. It has basically become aligned with Trump world. And some of the specific names that like organized this military parade, are the ones who are now kind of organizing the pageantry around America 250. So there's some names like Brad Parscale, who I think a lot of people know as a sort of longtime Trump world person, Chris LaCivitica, I've never said these names out loud. Chris LaCivita and Monica Crowley are a bunch of names that are in on the commission. Some of these people are actually also folks. There's been some reporting that show that some of the folks who organized the parade and are organizing the America 250 celebrations were also the people who organized the the rally that then turned into January 6th. I mean, these names.
Wow.
See, there they nailed spectacle.
There they nailed spectacle. You're right. But Nikki,
they're like, you want a parade? Yeah. We got your parade.
I guess so. For better or worse, you're much more familiar with these names, Nikki, than we are. But can you paint the picture of like the people who are like literally just like at the controls now?
I mean, these are Trump loyalists. These are people who, in trying to lean into this kind of patriotic celebratory message, see it as much a celebration of Trump as it is a celebration of the U.S. And I think that's going to be the thing that is distinct about the 250th, is that it is being put together by people who are kind of like buy into Trump's l'état c'est moi kind of feel, right? Like that he and the state are inseparable and that he is the head of the state and so has to be honored as part of the project of honoring America. And then you add to that the kind of persistent grift that is a part of these projects, right? Like there was a moment in the military parade where it was like, brought to you by Coinbase, brought to you by Bitcoin and
or whatever, which is even better. Yeah.
Well, I mean, even more. I mean, so on the one hand, yes, like sponsored by the crypto scams, and then on the other side, like brought to you by the surveillance state that is like recording your conversations right now with things like Palantir.
Yeah. I mean, there was
you feel like celebrating?
There was a Bitcoin conference in Las Vegas earlier this year. It's called the Bitcoin Conference. It's the largest and most influential gathering of the Bitcoin world as it purports to itself. And it announced that America 250 would be co-hosting the first day of the conference. And it had a whole day of programming called Code and Country. I think an indicator that this America 250 thing is a project on its own, but it is also going to be used as a kind of like, parasite eating the host kind of thing, to bring in all these other things that we know Trump world is up to. And so like, what does a Bitcoin conference have to do with America 250? Nothing other than it's a chance to kind of brand something and probably raise some more money, for the Trump family. But that's now part of our semi-quincentennial thing is Bitcoin conferences. And again, sponsorships. So you can go to America250.org and you can see kind of all the sponsors that have lined up. I think a lot of those were lined up a long time ago. And, it would make sense that Coca-Cola is a sponsor or whatever. But now, all of a sudden, Coca-Cola is going to be asked to play this game that we've started to lay out here. And I think it's going to be really interesting.
Ask Target how that worked.
Yeah. Yeah, super effective. Okay, a couple other specific things that have played out. One other thing that has happened as the America 250 project has kind of gotten magnified is there is still, at the local level, a lot of sort of people are using this occasion to do really interesting work of history. And we're going to keep our eye on that in our newsletter. But there was a whole infrastructure around the America 250 project that included a lot of like advisory councils and local organizations and sort of, the way that you would build a big organization years out in advance. And a lot of that kind of local infrastructure just basically got, for lack of a better word, doged. I mean, I don't know if it was literally Doge that went in there and did this, but basically they got eliminated. And so, for instance, There was some reporting that mentioned a person named Sarah Capon, who was the executive director of the Niagara Falls National Heritage Area. And she was on a local council, and, Niagara Falls was going to play its part in telling the story of America 250.
Mm-hmm.
And basically people like her and members of councils like hers were told, like, nah, we're good. Like, you're not part of this anymore. And, your mission doesn't align with our mission. And it's basically been hollowed out to all these other kind of other ways in which American history could manifest itself throughout all of this. That's not to say that, like, your local library isn't going to do an America 250 thing, but it really is important to see how the, like, infrastructure has just really been subverted here.
It also, the 250th, and the reason we're focusing on it is because it is such an incredible opportunity to focus on the meaning of U.S. history. And there is obviously going to be the America 250 MAGA story that is being trumpeted everywhere, that's going to have all the money and the power of the state behind it. But it's not the only place where storytelling is happening. And I do think that that's really important, just tying it back to your No Kings comment earlier, Jody, that there is organizing and work that's being done, and it's not very well funded, and it's taken a lot of hits in the past year or so, and that some people are afraid to actually do programming in this area because of the crackdowns that have been happening at the federal and state level. And yet it's there. And if you can find ways to seek it out and support it, maybe you can support it monetarily, but you can also support it just by showing up and taking an opportunity to celebrate and support the counter narratives that are going to be coming out as this whole shindig gets underway.
Yeah.
Yeah. Look, you hinted at it subtly, and I'll say it explicitly. Like, I've even felt this in trying to think about this show and next year's project. Like, some of the grants that we would maybe apply for with a year-long initiative tied to, the semi-quincentennial. Like, I've poked around at those grants, and those grants have been, the framework of those grants have been rewritten. And they're basically like, we're looking for projects that are going to help tell the magnified version of America 250 that support our mission, that support the kind of Garden of Heroes storytelling that we want to tell. And I'm like, we're not going to get this grant, even though, again, I want to reiterate, like, most of our work.
We could lie.
And some people listen to the show. We're not gonna try and tell, like, this isn't a political project next year. We're gonna do what we normally do on the show, which is like try and tell good stories in context and so forth.
Yeah.
But that is seen as a political project, I think, now. And I'm like, man, and again, like, a lot of academia is in a defensive crouch. A lot of funders are in a defensive crouch. It is just really fascinating. Don't boo-hoo us. Like, there's people who are losing huge grants and huge initiatives.
Huge amounts of money.
Yeah, I just read a quote from someone.
And their jobs.
Yeah, and who just lost their job. Yeah, exactly. So, but, it is playing out in all these interesting ways. One specific thing I want to mention, and then we'll get out of here. But, part of this America 250 project, it's the infrastructure has been co-opted, and then it's manifesting itself in lots of different ways. And Trump, in the last week or two, has circled back to this. I would say he is fixated on Mount Rushmore. And, he has worked with Mount Rushmore. Mount Rushmore has announced that they're going to do fireworks over Mount Rushmore next July 4th in 2026, which I think is very important to Trump. I read, and I couldn't verify this, but I read that there was a mock-up of Mount Rushmore with Trump's face on it on the America 250 website. I couldn't find it. I think they may have taken it down after word got out, but wouldn't surprise me. And then, I don't know if people remember, but in the first administration, he had floated this idea of what was called a Garden of Heroes near Mount Rushmore, and it was on native land, and it was sort of like a very, dicey proposal there. But the idea there was to kind of have this Garden of Heroes near Mount Rushmore that would be full-size statues, and now they've sort of tooled it under the guise of America 250 and said we're going to have statues of 250 great Americans on this site, just a couple hundred yards from Mount Rushmore. The governor of North Dakota is playing ball with this. It looks like it's kind of in action. But do you have any thoughts on the Garden of Heroes and what it tells us?
So, if I recall correctly, we did an episode where we talked about, is it the Capitol that has
the statues in the Capitol.
statues in the Capitol, and how that is also being revisited because it was like no women and no people of color whatsoever. And in a Garden of Heroes, so who are we talking about? You know, how are there women going to be there at all?
Amelia Earhart is one of the mainstream floaters.
Amelia Earhart, that's easy. But like, you know, you wonder about who else will be included, and how they will go about making these, you know, renditions. I have a lot of skepticism about inclusion and what that's going to look like and what they're trying to tell with the choosing of those people.
Yeah.
Look, you want to put 250 statues up in South Dakota, by all means, have at it. I think that it is probably going to be a little bit like the military parade.
Yeah.
a little squeaky and underwhelming.
Well, each one
South
have a little
Dakota's not very easy
sponsorship
to get
underneath
to.
it. Yeah.
But I do think more broadly, it's just a manifestation of the larger theme that we've been talking about. I mean, if you go back to the fights over Confederate monuments in Charlottesville, Trump was in the mix very quickly over that. He likes statues. He likes statues of white guys on horses.
Yep.
And so you're going to see a lot of statues of white guys on horses, and like
They'll put Amelia Earhart on a horse. Why not? You know.
Clarence Thomas on a horse.
I know.
You know, Thomas Sowell on a horse. Like they're gonna pick whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think what's coming with that is not just the promotion, the putting up of these statues. It's also going to be the second part of this, which is what happens when people vandalize these statues? What happens when people tear these statues down? What are the consequences and penalties for doing those kinds of things? And does that change?
Straight to jail.
Yeah, as a way of saying, like, not only are we putting these statues up, but if anyone were to try to deface them, you are going to face real punishment and real time.
Interesting.
Well, and the executive order talks about this. So didn't Trump put into place, I don't know if it was an actual law passed or if he just declared it the way he does, but like you go to jail for 10 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, look, I'm thinking here, maybe for newsletter subscribers, as we get into the fall, we'll do who would be in your 250, who would be in your monument of American heroes.
Vote for Sexy Abe Lincoln.
On the back of my wall here.
Yes, that's good. It's a good start. But that's an interesting project. And look, I mean, you know, so we have the way that the America250 Commission is coming together. We have some specific manifestations of that already with regards to these, you know, what's happening in Mount Rushmore, what's happening at the local level. We have all the kind of sponsorships. We have, who knows, the next Bitcoin conference is on the way. All of this is the kind of stuff that we're going to track in our newsletter, America250 Watch. And we are asking you listeners to subscribe to that if you're interested. And then also that is your chance to really support this larger project that we have as we tell a bunch of stories of American history and watch how the story of American history is playing out over the next year. So please go to thisdaypod.com, subscribe to our newsletter, $7 a month, $76 a year. You can throw us more if you want to become a founding member, and we'll come up with a clever name for you founding members. Semi-quincentennialists. I think that's right.
Maybe you could vote on that too.
But we really appreciate all the support because we want to be very ambitious with this. And so thank you. All right. That's the end of this two-parter looking at America250. We'll be back with a quote-unquote regular episode on Tuesday. But this has been fun, and thanks to everyone who's been watching on YouTube. Nicole Hemmer, happy 6th of July.
Happy 6th of July, Jody.
And Kelly Carter Jackson, thanks to you.
My pleasure.
Bye, everyone.